All right, we were playing. Okay, hello, I am Mike Ramos. We are doing a pre-conference meeting with Mrs. Suarez, an English 1 teacher, and we're going to be discussing, or we're going to have a pre-conference on inferencing. So where are we going to begin? All right, so hi, good afternoon, Mrs. Suarez.
Hey,
how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Of course.
I just want to make sure that what we're doing, or what the pre-conference is all about, we just want to take a second to look at your objectives and your goals in your classroom and make sure they're aligned with good student outcomes.
Okay.
And then at the end, we want to take some time to explore some ways we can support you.
Okay.
Great. Awesome. So the first question that I have for you as we begin is, how are the goals for learning aligned to the state content standards?
The goals that we've set for this year for my observation and my teaching goal is to focus on TEAC 9.4C, which is our inferencing TEAC. I put the focus there, and that's where I think I can grow and help the kids grow the most, because it is our most heavily tested TEAC in the 9th grade. I don't know if you know this or not, but a couple of years ago, they changed the STAR test.
Okay.
Rather than writing an essay about like what's your true definition of friendship, that was the prompt one year.
Okay. Yeah.
They have now changed it to be a question that is connected to a passage, like the characterization or the plot or the figurative language used, that the student now has to inference on. Okay. So that's 40% of the test. They have to write an inference-based answer, right? Their short answer response is an inference-based answer.
Okay.
And they are tested with multiple choice questions. So I feel like if we focus on this TEAC, we can not only help students grow as readers and writers, right? And use that inferencing skill in the real world, then we're also going to help our scores grow, which helps us.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and you're 100% right. That 9.4 is a powerful TEAC. It can take kids a long way in class, in their studies, and outside the world. So you picked a wonderful TEAC to evaluate. So it's good. So that's interesting to hear. So my next question, I just want to stay and focus on the alignment of the lesson itself for a second. Is how are the lesson structure and pacing going to be addressed as you go along in your lesson?
Okay, right now we our lesson class periods are kind of chunked and broken up into sections, really to maintain focus of freshmen, right? So start with the warm-up or a bell ringer, move into a mini lesson, and then we'll move into the big lesson that breaks off into like a think, pair, share, or a group activity. Okay. We try to do one of the two multiple times a week, and then we'll end with an exit ticket so we can kind of gauge how the lesson went. Are the students retaining the information? Do we need to adjust? Do we need to reteach? And then with the 9.4 focus, I was saying that they have the writing skills and the questioning skills, right? Okay. So rather than bring in something new constantly, the idea this semester was, let's focus on one reading that multiple skills can apply to. So it's not constantly changing for the kids. And so we're looking at how can we apply that into their warm-up, into the mini lesson, into the group lesson, and then the exit ticket. That way the kids don't have to try to balance so many things.
Okay, wow, that sounds very interesting. Like you said, 9.4 is very dynamic, and so I was really liking your structure of your classes, and then what you're saying in regards to leveling or to scaffolding. Scaffolding 9.4 throughout your lesson. I think that's going to play huge dividends in your lesson. So great job.
Okay.
My next question is, I really want to take some time to look at specifically the instructional strategies that you're going to be using in your classroom. So in what ways do activities, resources, technology, and instructional materials align to your instructional goals?
I think that we have had to be really intentional with this. Like I said, moving into this semester, trying to slow down the chaos, right? And trying to mainstream it. Let's focus on one reading. we've had to be really intentional about the resources we use and bring in to meet the goal. Because the goal is that hopefully all students grow or show mastery in 9.4C.
Okay.
And so that might mean a bell ringer is a practice multiple choice question, but do we have one that matches the reading that we're doing? Or is it going to have to be something new? So I, along with my teammates, have been very intentional about finding reading practices that are attached to Romeo and Juliet, because that's our anchor text.
Okay.
Writing prompts that we can connect to it that help draw inferences from the students, whether they are actually writing them or we use them in discussion. And then bringing in some like teaching strategies that allow like think, pair, share, small group, partner work, and we can't lose focus of the grammar, right? Because if they're having to write about inferencing, they're having to use correct grammar and these things. And our district has provided a resource, it's called Progress Learning, where we can assign like a prompt with writing instructions that will check for grammar or sentence practice that aligns to Romeo and Juliet. And so we've just been bringing in those and trying to build our lessons to be productive and engaging, while not losing focus of the teak and not overwhelming with multiple readings.
That is great. That is great. Thank you for sharing. I really think your alignment is really strong here. I really think that because a lot of times you could, with the dynamics of English, which we know it can be very comprehensive, with you being able to just focus and not have to start all over.
Yeah.
And I think that's the goal here, not to start all over, but being able to use multiple mediums with the same content. You're not having to start over and focusing just on 9.4.
Yeah.
So I think that's an excellent job. Yes, I think that's good. Using those strategies and those passages will work.
10 years later, it's the first time, and I'm hoping we see some big changes and growth with it. So hopefully it'll work out.
Great. So we just want to take a second look at those instructional strategies. I want to move forward with lesson differentiation.
Okay.
As you know, our school has experienced a huge demographic shift, especially since COVID. So we went from a rural town where 500, 800 students at one time to pretty much a big 6A with 4,000 students.
That's so crazy.
We definitely have a lot of immigrants and migrants moving into the area, and then we've also had an area of the town of low socioeconomic status. So we really want to be able to meet the needs of those kids as well. Right. So how are students' backgrounds, language, and or cultural differences used to plan for instruction?
I think that the differences in our students has to be, and is, within our team, one of our driving forces in planning, right? We have our goal, we know what our objective is, what we're trying to get them to, and now how are we going to get them there?
Okay.
And so bringing in scaffolds and support systems are crucial to student success. Okay. An approach that I've taken in my classroom is universal scaffolds. Okay. And what I mean is, like, we know you're going to have to write an essay. We know you're going to have to write a short answer response. There are sentence stems that you can use no matter what the prompt is. Okay. Right? If I need you to transition from introduction to body paragraph or body paragraph to conclusion, you can say, furthermore, comma, or in the text, the author states, right? And then kind of teach them fill in the blanks. But using those universally, again, not having to start over every time. Okay. And them having them ready in their notebooks and on their desks with resources we have from our ESL department allows them some familiarity and some, I'm hoping, comfort in their academics, because it's something that they are used to. Now, is it working for everyone? I don't know.
I see.
But that is a strategy that we have put in place to try to meet the needs.
I see.
Of all the kids.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That's great. We got to meet the needs of our language learners. Right. And like you said, it could be very difficult. So I'm really like what I'm hearing about the universal graphic organizers. So they can't get confused with all the different classes. So Good job and way to keep
Thank
that
you.
up. As we move forward though, like I want to stay in the realm of lesson differentiation because you're doing a great job. It sounds like with differentiating for students, but we don't want kids to fall through the cracks. We want to be able to meet their student needs. So what are the student behaviors? What specific student behaviors do you look for during your lessons as signals that differentiation is not working?
I think that naive new teacher me would have thought that these behaviors are probably disruptive or behavioral problems that need a write-up. Okay. I think more seasoned teacher me is like, hey, this kid is confused or this kid isn't getting it, right? I have kids, if I'm thinking about my classes specifically, I have kids I know when I start the meat of the lesson, we finish the bell ringer, we finish the mini lesson, we're going into the meat of it. Can I go to the bathroom? Can I go to the bathroom? Right, like can I get out of it somehow? Right. I'm like every day at the same time. I mean, maybe you eat a lot of fiber for breakfast. I don't know. Yeah. But right, it's the same people. We call them frequent flyers. Right. They're always gone, right? Or the same person I know is when they break up into group work, right? Or they're doing think, pair, share. They're rummaging through their backpack, but they're really on their phone. Right. Right. Just kind of avoidance behavior. Okay. Anything to get out of the work. And so I'm like, is this kid really, do they not know? Are they confused? Do they just not like the class? I'm having a hard time, I see, kind of deciphering, but I have noticed a pattern in that behavior. Okay. And it's always at the same time of every lesson, if that makes sense. See.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. We're going to spend some time exploring. I kind of mentioned a strategy earlier. We're going to spend some time at the end exploring some of these issues. But I think you mentioned it earlier too. Like that issue and that student behavior can be a signifier for something else and not necessarily a bad behavior. Right. And we're not really want to focus on deficit thinking, but that student in particular might be needing a different approach or signal or routine so that he can get focused on what they're doing. And I think you might clear some of those issues. Okay. So we'll spend some time at the end. Awesome. And we're pretty much done here. We just want to take some time to look at assessments and look at how you're, looking at your data and meeting the needs of students specifically with the use of data. So how is data provided to students to help them identify their own learning needs and track their own progress?
Yeah. In English 1, we provide immediate feedback data in 2 ways. So every 2 weeks, we've built in a day where we do studio stations. Okay. And one of those stations is a conference or small group with the teacher. And so there will be some low stakes activity, either a review of what we've already done or a prediction as to what we're going to do, where I can kind of gauge like, hey, you're getting this, great job, you're ready to move on. Hey, we probably need to review this. Let's set up tutorial time. I see. What I've noticed with that one is if the students aren't friends, so to speak, or familiar with their group, they don't always share. So I don't know if that's true data. Right. Right. So that's been a little problematic, I think. Okay. And then we give formal data after every assessment. We have a data tracker that's broken down by TEAC. So I know that's true data because it's their tested results. Okay. Right. But while that's great for me, right, and I can see it, I don't know if the students understand it because while I've tried to simplify it, it's still the TEACs, and they don't really know the TEACs or understand that jargon. I see. So I don't know if either one's foolproof or fabulous, but we are trying to get it out to them in 2 ways. Okay. And you make up an interesting point because there isn't a day I go by that I look at the students and they're tracking their health, which is too cool with these apps. Yeah. Or they're tracking I saw a kid on Babbel, was it Babbel? And it was Rosetta Stone, and they're tracking their learning of foreign languages. Wow. So you bring up a good point because if students in your lesson on inferencing, if the data is not set in stone, or the data we're having deficits in data, and the students are unable to understand and interpret their data, and I can see how it could be not a focus for them. It could be disinteresting for them. So I'm glad you brought it up. Let me talk to the team. Let me talk to the IoT team so that we can provide maybe some options
that can help, you know, especially with your inferencing lessons so that students can understand their growth in inferencing.
Yeah.
So we can look at flyers, maybe some modules, some review modules, or even a training session for kids so they can be able to understand the data better.
Nice. That would be awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So we want to just take some time with some teacher concerns, make sure that's recording. Is there any concerns that you might have in your classroom that I might need to know about?
I think there's one that hopefully you can provide some insight and maybe some strategies to help with.
Okay.
Earlier I was talking about those disengaged students, right? Not necessarily behavior problem, not acting out, but definitely disassociated and disengaged with their peers or the meat of the lesson. And so I'm looking for ways, while we follow classroom strategy, campus strategy, right? Phones up, come to class prepared on time. They have the materials. They're just not doing or engaging the work. So if maybe you had a bank or some ideas of information to help get those kids more engaged and on task, that would be really beneficial.
So you bring up a valid point. I like that. Do you have any specific examples of what's going on? I know you mentioned a distraction or not, but do you have any specific examples of like what time of the day, the period it's happening, or is it during transition?
It's usually during bell ringers, fine, right? Mini lesson, fine, but when we have to go to group work, specifically, I know in every class I can pull a handful of kids out who are immediately shut off. And sometimes it doesn't even matter if their friends are in the group. It's like when they have to do the academics together, we're shutting down. We're trying to go to our phones. We're trying to go to the bathroom. You know, all of a sudden we forgot how to talk. Like, how do I address those kids and get them engaged? Because they're not being rude to people. They're not being disruptive. They're just not engaged in doing the work.
Can you share with me, to get a better picture of this, can you share with me what is your current routine or expectation in class in regards to this? So
the hope is, right, that we've followed all the rules to this point. Most often we have, right? Our phones are up, we're following the MLD rule, everyone's prepared on time, everyone has their materials, and the expectation when they go into Think, Pair, Share is they're broken up into their table spaces, right? So if we're in long rows, it splits every 4 people. If we're in single rows, you turn to the person to the right, and then you divide and conquer the work, right? You'll either have a discussion task that needs an answer, or you'll have a project or something tangible to work on. And that all parties involved are engaged in working, and you're not putting the work on one person. And we discussed and planned these norms and expectations as a class for every class. So they've all kind of signed off on that, right? And that's how the year's going to go. It's always going to happen. So let's be upfront and set those expectations. But there's those kids that they just don't want to. But I'm afraid it's because they don't know how.
I see. You know, you bring up an interesting point, and I really think, Ms. Juarez, that you have the expectations and routine set in class. From what I'm hearing, that's not the problem. Your engagement and your instructional practices are really good. I would suggest one of the issues that we might be having is, like I mentioned earlier about assigning roles. I think students are going to be disengaged if they don't know what is their duty. So like note taking, someone for note taking. You know, one of the issues that a lot of our students have, because we've had that demographic shift. I just spent some time with an ESO student who can probably be our valedictorian.
Really?
Yeah, but it was quiet. He doesn't want to talk, or he doesn't want to share his ideas. So in order to tap into that, it's a good opportunity to like assign roles. Well, you know what? If he's embarrassed to share because of his accent, you know, the whoever has the role of the sharing can share for him. And now we're expressing it as ideas, and they're not just being swept under the table.
Nice. Okay, I like that.
Oh, interesting. Awesome. Great. And that's really it, Ms. Juarez. Really appreciate your time. I just want to leave you with that I'm really excited to go into your classroom and see your observation.
Yeah.
And so is there anything in that observation period, that 45-minute period, where you want me to specifically look at?
Yeah, so I think that the day will follow like normal, right? I'll have a bell ringer, we'll do a mini lesson, then our big lesson will break off into groups, think, pair, share. That's what I most commonly use.
Okay.
And I really want to, while you're in there, try it with these roles that you've mentioned to me.
Okay.
And assigning those. My concern is, am I giving enough think time? Am I giving enough share time now that I've incorporated this? So if you could help me monitor that and maybe provide some feedback on things to change, tweak, do better, maybe something I missed, that would be really great since it'll be my first time.
Awesome. I can definitely do that when I'm in your classroom. I'll look specifically for that, and then I'll provide you some feedback when we get together during the post observation.
Okay, that sounds great.
Thank you. All right. Well, hello again. My name is Mike Ramos. We are now conducting our post conference observation with Mrs. Suarez. Thank you very much. Mrs. Suarez, thank you so much for joining us again.
Of course.
I really appreciate it, and just wanted to take a second to kind of go over our post conference material and your observation that we had just yesterday. I want to say. First of all, thank you for allowing me into your classroom, observing your class. I really enjoyed the lesson you had put together that day.
Thank you.
And now we'll just go over a few questions and discuss how you thought the lesson went.
For sure. Sounds
awesome.
Good.
Great. So first of all, let's just reflect on the lesson. How do you think the lesson went?
If we are breaking it down portion by portion, I think that staying on track, like we talked about, keeping the reading materials all connected, Romeo and Juliet, the kids are starting to finally make that connection like, hey, I know what they're talking about. Hey, this isn't new. This isn't the hard part. And they're able to talk about the skill more and reflect on that, then focus on trying to understand the reading. So I think in that aspect, it's going in the direction we want it to go, right? Like we're able to start making inferences because they're catching on. Some of the issues that we discussed last time about like student involvement and engagement, some of those were thwarted with the implementation of roles, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment. But I still have those few. I've got to figure out what that barrier is. Like, do we just not want to learn? Is there some outlying reason that's disconnecting them? You know, something going on from home. I think that's going to be a kind of a relationship building thing that we're going to have to figure out. But I think the lessons for inferencing are moving in the right direction.
And I would agree with you 100%. You're spot on. When I did make my observations, I did notice some of those issues that you were having. So I did put it on my list to talk about, and about, you know, those few quick students in the corner who were on their cell phone or whatnot. And I would love to talk to you about that, but I agree with you 100%. Your objective inferencing seemed like it was quick. Those kids were quick to make those inferences.
Yeah, I wish you could have seen day one to now. You know, because then they're like, oh, I don't really know Romeo and Juliet. I can't really draw any information, but now that the repetition is, oh, this is kind of the same thing. Thing, that inferencing is getting a lot easier.
Awesome. And I like that too, because I know several of the students, mostly all of them, but I know the two that raised their hand to share were really quick to like relate it to themselves and their background. So they really make the connections, how they were in the locker room and how they are in, you know, during Shakespearean time, and how they boys are boys.
Yeah, it's been a big topic of conversation, especially in those boy-heavy classes like you were in.
Yes. So what aspects of the lessons were most effective in achieving your instructional goals, do you think?
Most effective, I think that my exit ticket is not going like planned, so we're not going to focus on the exit ticket. I think that the bell ringers it's what's kind of setting the pace, right? They're getting in, they are comfortable with the reading now, and they know, okay, I've got to figure out how I can pull the information I know and what we're reading to answer this question. And just setting that routine, I think that has helped, and it's making the comprehension of the reading go much better. So the discussion is getting better, right? Like you said, they're having those conversations. Boys are boys. They're comparing themselves from their locker room talk, their sports teams, to what's happening in the streets in Verona. And that's fine. But then when I'm asking them to write it, that's where we're getting stuck, right? So we're making progress.
Okay, yes.
We're able to talk about the inferencing. We're able to apply it to a question.
Right.
And now we're gonna have to go back and focus on the writing because there's a disconnect somewhere.
Right, okay. And you know, like, don't sell yourself short just because like those passages that you were talking about, so I can see how those inferences definitely led right into understanding those passages in a quicker rate. But definitely that writing component can be difficult, and we can talk about how we can implement some more writing into your lessons.
Okay.
But that overall, terrific, great job. Hey, real quick here, I have a question on differentiation just to make sure like we're meeting the needs of our EB students and stuff. So, what did you think? What instructional strategies worked well in regards to your differentiation? Which ones might you modify for next time?
So in our reading, in our groups, right, we're divided, the Montagues and the Capulets, but they're in their groups. So when we read and then I ask questions, they can go kind of summarize the reading for the day. I've assigned task cards. Today, you're gonna ask the questions. Today, you're gonna record the answers. And then let them know how many responses they need to have. So there's only 2 jobs, but there's also a goal. Each question needs at least 2 responses.
Okay.
So they know they've got to do that. I think that helped participation.
Okay.
I think one thing that I need to do with that is combine 2 of the things we talked about last time, is bringing those universal writing strategies like the sentence stems into the tasks. Right, and make a combination rather than keeping them separate always. Bringing those together, because I noticed a couple of my EB students were the recorder of the discussion, and they're listening, but they don't really know academically how to start that. So I think that is something that would be refined and tweaked going into the next round. But I do think that the use of those tasks, like you mentioned, and giving them a job, giving all students a job, that really kind of thwarted some of the issues we were having. So that was very nice. I hope you saw some of that.
I did take notice of that. I was very intrigued by it. I found it very interesting because, as a matter of fact, it really looked like those EB students knew what was going on and really wanted to express their ideas. And that one of the little girls, I think her name was Janet, may or maybe not, she was able to help the EB student bring out what he wanted to say. And I just felt like, you know, it was really highlighting their level of intelligence, so to speak, when they were providing their answer. Very so much that I did notice that issue that you were talking about, the kids on the side, so that you're able to get more out of that EB student who had limited English.
I think
than
so.
Those kids who continue don't want to get down into the meet and greet of everything. So those task cards were 100% really good for those EB students.
Thanks
so
for
much,
that.
and I think that so much that those task cards could be used in a way like we're going to talk about that writing component with those other students who struggled, and I think they're probably struggling because of their lack of writing skills. What do you think about that? Do you think those task cards can help those kids?
I think so, and I think combining them with, and maybe it's not even a task per person, right? Because we don't always do writing in a group, but like if you have a to-do task list, and this has to be done first. To do that, here's your sentence stem, and then second you have to do this, almost like an individualized checklist. But maybe it will keep them on track, and they see it and they're like, oh, I can do that. Oh, I know that. Oh, she already started it for me. This isn't going to be too bad. I'm hoping maybe a combination of those 2 things, incorporating them so they can be used on an individual basis. And then maybe if they're doing that and they realize, hey, I can do this, then they won't be so reluctant to work back in that group with those same tasks.
I agree with you 100%. Matter of fact, you actually went towards one kid and gave him a card. You have to show it through it. And the first one he didn't connect with, but another one he did. So I like that. That was a good job.
Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, so we just real quick, just to kind of wrap everything up. Just want to make sure that we go back and look at the focus of the area and give you the appropriate feedback. Overall, I think that you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Keep it up. Your lesson was very aligned to that inferencing technique. Using the passages in your warm-up really got the kids to a level of understanding of inference. So real quick, you asked for feedback on how you facilitate discussions. How do you feel about your questioning strategies when you did so?
I think that my questioning strategy is just one, right? Like I'm just asking the question. I think maybe, you know how I gave out the task cards, maybe if there's a card with the question that they can keep on the desk rather than, you know, groups talking and like, wait, what did you say? What did you say? Maybe it'll be less of a distraction if I add that card there.
Okay.
And maybe, I don't know, even give an example answer to allow them to build on and then give differentiation in their own thoughts.
Okay.
But as the day was progressing, after I saw you, I was like, I think that I could do this a little bit differently and keep everybody on track. Just because when everyone's waiting on you and they're in groups, you know, they get off task then.
Right.
And so maybe we can combat that with having the question with the task cards.
You know, you said that you're right. I like those ideas. Those are great. You did say that they got off task, and you know, it did get a little loud, and the conversation started to stray. But they were still talking about those concepts.
Good.
They were not. They weren't talking about Romeo and Juliet, but it was still the concepts of how easily their friends are falling in love with each other. They don't even know each other, and they're giving each other's kisses and rings and stuff like that.
See, they don't even know they're making inferences.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I was very impressed by that, and how hate that's happening within the different teams and stuff like that. And just because one team, I think one kid mentioned the rival football team and the fight they had during the fall football game, and how they could be friends on another time. So they are definitely inferencing.
Look, I'm going to take that and I'm going to tell them, hey, Mr. Ramos heard all these great conversations, all this inferencing you don't even know you're doing. So why are we blanking when we're writing? And I'm going to use that as my introduction strategy.
Very
be like,
much.
Hey, you know these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remember what you said about that football game. Remember what you said about your rivals. Yeah.
So I think overall those are constructive conversations.
Yeah, awesome. I'm so glad you got to hear that. And I'm so glad, like, because I don't always hear every group when I'm working with one, you know? And so it's nice to hear that even though what I think is them being off task, that you really did hear good conversation that aligned with what we want them to do ultimately.
Awesome. I appreciate. Thank you for inviting me into your class. Thank you for allowing me to observe. Wonderful class. One takeaway I would say, if you want to take some time to do some professional development on effective strategies and signaling. Signaling is a powerful tool where you make different noises, different sounds, and the kids understand that, okay, they can rotate to the next person or do the next task or bring your attention back to you. I think that will kind of help with the transitioning of your lesson. But overall, great job on your alignment, great job on getting student outcomes.
Thank you. Thank you for all the support and the suggestions. They seem to be working, so I'll keep taking them.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.